we're back again with Something Wicked Film Festival. No, I didn't forget the name of the film festival, although it always sounds like I'm going to. And we're going to talk about, I think this is going to be one of the more interesting topics we're going to talk about here at the festival this weekend, and that is the growth and the changing of the Atlanta film industry from the early 1990s to the present, because it really went through what I would call almost a roller coaster of events, where it was up for a little while, down for a little while, and back up again, and now it is skyrocketing. And gone through some interesting things, and going through a little bit of our personal experiences with that industry and where it may be headed. So we've got a huge panel here, and I didn't do this last time. I want everyone to introduce themselves down the line and let us know who you are, especially the one who's not from Georgia. No, I'm just kidding. We're letting Steve sit in with us again.
Well, I'm Stephen Wise. I'm a filmmaker from Florida, so I'm the outsider of the group. Hopefully throwing a little bit of a perspective from outside the state on this topic.
As long as you're not a guider, we don't care.
I'm Martin Kelly. I'm an Atlanta filmmaker, and I have been around since the 90s.
I'm Samantha Worth, and I'm an actor.
I'm Keith Brooks. Rob Prago doesn't like to share his microphone. And I am an Atlanta filmmaker and actor, and I was like 4 in 1990, so we'll see how this goes.
Are you calling me old?
No.
I'm Rob Prago. I'm an Atlanta actor. I'm old as dirt. I've been around since the 90s, and this is my microphone.
So for those of us who might have been living in Atlanta in the 1990s and doing a little acting, let's talk a little bit about some of those early days. They were challenging, but there was some fun stuff that happened in those first 10 years in the film industry down here. Share your experiences a little bit with how because it really planted the seed for what was yet to come.
Since starting in the 90s?
The 90s, yeah.
Well, I graduated college in '89, so I literally started.
You really started, yeah.
1990
So you've got a great perspective on this.
Right after, went from Bennigan's waiting tables right into studying acting. Interestingly enough, the joke we have now with a lot of my actor friends is back prior to this renaissance pre-tax incentive, if you were an actor here in the Southeast, you knew every single project that was about to shoot, shooting, and then finished shooting. You were aware of it. You knew the casting directors. You knew everything. And in this day and age, the beauty of it is, every day somebody says, "Hey, did you read for this?" I'm like, "I hadn't even heard of that." That's how many projects are in here now in the Southeast and primarily Georgia.
We'll tell you right now, within the last 3 months, 182 projects have committed to Georgia. That's why we don't know them all.
Wow, that's and again, but that's beautiful, you know. And I hear this a lot from actors. Hey, it must be, or just people in general. It must be a great time right now to be an actor in Georgia. Here's the caveat: it's a great time to be an actor in Georgia if you're on the radar of the casting directors. That's the wonderful thing. It's got to be every bit as frustrating and infuriating right now to be an actor in Georgia who's not either on the radar or considered good, because there is so much more low-hanging fruit, day player, supporting, co-star roles. They still, I truly believe, they're still casting primarily the leads in New York and LA or outside here, but fine. There's so much opportunity. It's such a great place right now, and it's always been a great place. Commercially, advertising-wise, it's always been a good market for industrials and corporate stuff and commercials, indie film. It's always been a really ripe indie place. That hasn't changed. It's just gotten better. Where it's changed, obviously, is we're now 1 or 2 on globally for money spent on TV and film production. That's where it's changed. Is it 1 right now? Martin Kelly's pointing right now. We are number 1. That's astounding, and I applaud the wonderful people who have been traveling the world, pointing out Georgia to the rest of the world, and who had intricately put together the tax incentive and bridged multiple legislatures. And it's an amazing place to be. Stay where you are, folks. We have enough. Just kidding. Hey,
I like, from my perspective, I was born in the 80s, right? So growing up, theater, acting became a huge ambition of mine. And even in the early 2000s, I thought it was best for me to leave the state in order to pursue that career. It was not a viable career here. And then I came back for other reasons and came back into, just as you adequately called it, a renaissance, like something else was happening. Before that, I had visited one film set in my entire life, and it was Scream 2 when they were shooting at Agnes Scott, and that's because I was in love with Nev Campbell. And so, like, and I got, like, this close to her.
Everyone was,
Yeah, yeah. And so, and I can name, like, Fried Green Tomatoes, Manhunter. Those are the only other films that I could think of that were even shot in Georgia prior to that. And then now, there is still what Rob was referring to, the wall, where we're only Georgia local, Georgia grown. It's only being seen for a specific amount of parts. But I think slowly that's breaking. You look at amazing actors like Eric Mendenhall, who went from a great part on The Walking Dead to now he's one of the main bad guys on Black Lightning, and he's an Ozark, and some of our actors are breaking through that and getting the bigger roles, and that's awesome. And I think it's going to just increasingly happen more and more. But yeah, it's every year, even from when I came back to Georgia, over the past 8 years, it's gotten so expansive. There is an ebb and flow to things where sometimes it's slow for the locals, but for the most part, it's always new productions, always something new, a new studio going up, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely, and he's right. Around the early 1990s, I got my first union agent in '89, and so I was able to start reading for the good stuff then. But it was true; they were bringing in virtually not only the stars and co-stars and principals. You got to read for day roles. You got to read for one line or two lines, which is fine. Just for the experience of getting that. I would even do featured stuff if it paid well enough, just to get on the set and meet these people. I think the thing that has changed so dramatically that I've seen in the last 25 years or so is that not only were the production companies bringing in all the actors, they're bringing all the crew as well. And what we have seen here that has been an incredible resurgence of a crew talent base that is just next to none. Absolutely. Going from an industry that was, I don't want to say looked down on, but there were movies, and there were movies shot in Georgia. And that implied, and then there were movies shot in Florida, which really implied, oh my God, those were the bottom feeders. And then Atlanta had this sort of redneck type attitude, they had this attitude that, yeah, they were okay. We could throw them in a few roles here and there, or let some of their people, but we couldn't really count on them to do the big stuff. And that's changed. I think that's changed dramatically. Since
I think that idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, I disagree a little bit with that. I got into the industry more in the mid-'90s, so when the work was starting to go away. And I remember that I was at a Women in Film breakfast, and there were some producers who'd done some movies of the week, and they said, we can go to Canada and make them. It was all about the financial.
Yeah, that's in Toronto really hurt us badly.
Right,
yeah.
but in terms of the crew, I think that historically our crews have actually always been quite respected, but not as deep. We didn't have the depth where I think a couple things happened with the tax incentive and with the growth of the industry. Plus, we had some neighboring states that lost some of that business. So we've had a lot of crew relocate from North Carolina, even some from South Carolina, and people move here every day. Whether it's actors, crew members, people are moving to Georgia.
Oh, they are.
But I do think that every now and then you do run into that. I agree with you completely. Our IATSE is strong. Our Force of 9, everybody on that is great. You have that. There was a weird situation where I'm going to try not to say any specific of details, where a company commissioned several pilots, right, here in town, and they were all produced locally written, locally acted, and they were all rejected, and they're going to reshoot one of them. But even in the meeting that I went to of reshooting one of them, I was cast, these people were criticizing the local crew and the local stuff. And it was to a degree where a lot of us that were local were sort of upset about it, you know what I mean? Some of those criticisms are correct because they were getting from the bottom of the barrel, but some of them I felt were just too harsh, you know what I mean? Oh, yeah. But I do think, like, Georgia, before even the Renaissance, had produced award-winning films. Deliverance was partially Georgia, right? Yeah. And so we've always had that talent base, and anytime a new industry comes and revitalizes, there's going to be a learning curve. But I've shot in a lot of places, in fucking Georgia, we got it. Like, we have the most amazing crews. Some of our actors are all right, but and we have the best caterers too. Go.
No, I agree. No, I mean the crews are just sterling right now. Let's keep going on down the line.
What you're
here.
talking about is the difference between using Georgia as a location and having infrastructure. And that's what Atlanta has now, is an infrastructure where you know that if Hollywood brings a film here, that there are crews, there's talent to pull from, that there are other facilities that they can use, that it's a hub. It's not just a location that they go to rent and then leave.
No, and I think, in terms of just speaking on the crew aspect, I think it's been enough time now that the indie scene, as well as the incoming Hollywood, for lack of a better word, scene, has cultivated enough crew base that the depth is getting better. And so I think, and it makes it hard for me as an independent filmmaker from Georgia, because I end up cultivating crew members that go on to work for Marvel, and they don't come back to work for me.
But I think the world is looking at us a whole lot different than they used to. Because I honestly, like you said, we shot Deliverance here. There were a couple of films by Burt Reynolds, but we did have Fried Green Tomatoes and Driving Miss Daisy and stuff. Because when I first got started in this business, it seemed like this underlying attitude that, we can make a movie in Georgia, but we can't make a great movie in Georgia. You know what I'm saying? There was a real bias.
I think the
towards what
tendency
you could
was that a movie shot in Georgia had to have that rural feel.
Yeah.
But nowadays, Asgard became a part of Atlanta.
Yeah.
Like, Wakanda is Atlanta.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are sort of opening up. Even when I first started, Wilmington was the center. Wilmington was where you had to drive for auditions, which fucking sucked, but all that stuff. But the appeal of Wilmington was you had all these locations within a 20-mile radius, so it could be fucking anything that you wanted it to be. Georgia has that. It's a little more spread out than it is in Wilmington. But now, like you said, we've started on the infrastructure. I don't think our infrastructure is perfect yet. I think we still have a long way to go. But we do have Pinewood. We do have OFS. We do have Screen Gems. We have all these places where you can go build anything that you fucking want to. And we have this crew that has now developed their own crew culture within the city. Like, we have... Today, we lost a sound guy for a project, and I've been going through my phone, and I've already reached out to 14 different people, because that's the industry that we all know so many people that work in this industry now. And it's just surrounding us. And I think that's awesome to see. Basically, the Atlanta film market, it's existed for decades and decades and decades. And Rob, who was born in the 1800s, can attest to that. But I feel that, like, it's now gotten into its teenage years. Like, it's growing, and every day you can see that.
What was it like making a film by candlelight? I can't imagine that.
It was actually beautiful.
Yeah.
It was lovely. It was incandescent. Yes, it was nice. I was going to say, I think, as far as back to, us being in Georgia and hearing back before the tax incentive that, films in Georgia have a certain lower quality. I think we hear that because we're in Georgia. I think if you're not in New York or LA, even to this extent, there's still an attitude or belief that that's where you make movies in New York or LA, and anything outside is a bit slumming. And so I think
I think that's changing. I think that's changed
radically
in the last year.
I'm saying back in the day.
Oh, back then, absolutely.
If we were in Detroit, we'd hear the same thing with a few movies shot there. If we were in Delaware, or if we were in Minnesota, North Dakota, we'd hear, that's what we'd hear.
Well, it was true in North Dakota.
There was a certain, there's some beautiful stuff up there. I still think there's an elite, I don't know, elitist. New York and LA was where it always was. And it's still going to take a while to change that mindset. And again, I'm not knocking. I knew no actors that are getting guest star roles here now that are local, but it's going to take time. It's just the longer a producer is here, the more comfortable they are going to get with the local market, and the more they will utilize that. The first time producer coming here is still going to be like, I want to bring my guys. And I understand that completely. It's going to take time to do it, and it'll never be a complete overhaul. And other places will follow suit to what we did, and things will come and go just as they have.
Well, there's going to be an ebb and flow. I mean, Marvel has moved on, which I hate, but because I'm a comic book geek. But there'll be something else to take its place. I think the fact that, for some of us, because we got complacent in the 90s. It started slipping away in Toronto. Wilmington sort of sealed the deal. Because Toronto, we got a little bit back thanks to SARS. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I mean, that really helped. That chased a lot of the movie industry back out of Toronto, back to us. But Wilmington really kicked butt there for a while. And then New Orleans comes into the picture and just very quietly nailed us in the butt. And until, we had to address that before we could get this industry back.
I think all those places had tax incentives, and I think
They did.
ultimately it's been
They did.
growth. And I think the people here, the very smart, talented people here in town that did craft this tax incentive and have shepherded it over legislatures, noticed that and watched that and studied that and what was going on in North Carolina.
Well, we
what
had
was
a
going on
learning
in New
curve.
Orleans.
We had a learning curve because we tried to pass a tax incentive first. And it got very watered down in the General Assembly. And it was like, yeah, we know what New Orleans is doing, but we can't really do that. And it was a total disaster. 2 years later, and this is, I'm going to, really, really tip my hat to Shay Griffin because she never gave up. She put together a team of people, and I'm very proud to have been part of that. I had a chance to sit down with a huge producer out of Los Angeles at the time. He had moved all of his productions to Vancouver, and I asked him flat out, I said, what's it going to take for you to bring your productions here? This is bottom line. It's that simple. I said, no, come on, it can't be that simple. It's got to be more common. He says, no, you give us a better deal, we're moving here tomorrow. And we pass that on to Shay, and she brings in guys like Wilbur Fitzgerald and some really talented people that knew what the hell they were doing. They analyzed what was working and what we could do better and tweaking New Orleans a little bit. Just that little tweak that we offered, that was a little bit, going from 25 to 30 and just in a couple of the incentives and things. And literally, when that signed off, when Sonny Perdue signed off on that bill, and this is no exaggeration, folks, within 24 hours, we had 38 productions that were committed in Shreveport, Louisiana, coming to Georgia overnight. And we virtually put that city out of business, film-wise. There's still people in this state that want to do away with this incentive. $11 billion last year, folks. $11 billion. This was happening during a recession, and where we got stung when the housing industry crashed in Georgia in 2006, we have replaced that and then some, as far as numbers of jobs and money coming into the state. So I mean, somebody did their homework right this time around, and hopefully we can not get complacent again, not take it for granted.
Well, one of the beautiful things about the tax incentive as well that some people don't realize is the producers benefit from the tax incentive. But there are other businesses that are highly impacted.
Yeah.
When there was a hearing down at the Capitol before everything went through, there was a commercial real estate gentleman who got up on the stand and he was talking about his business. And he said, with the way that the housing market is going right now, I can't move my product. I cannot lease the commercial real estate. So he partnered and started leasing it for film and TV production. Same thing with the lumber company. Then you look at the dry cleaners, then you look at the restaurants and the hotels and on down. And so even though they don't get the benefit directly of the tax incentive, it comes down.
I was on a film and a major motion picture star was talking to me. Every day on set, I would notice that we had a specific taco stand. Like we had catering, but there was a specific taco truck. And this actor told me, he's the star of the film, that he had been to Georgia to shoot before, and he ate at this taco truck a couple times and liked the food a lot and started talking to the guy, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm probably going to lose my business after a little while just because the truck food business, it wasn't doing so hot, et cetera, et cetera. So part of his contract coming back to Georgia was to make sure that guy was on set every single day. And it's insane things like that. That's an extreme example. But by having the incentives, they're not only just for the producers. It specifies a certain amount of Georgia talent.
That's
Georgia
important. Yeah,
hires,
good point.
and it's almost like in Canada, part of the Canadian film incentive, the film incentive, not the television, is that in order to get grants from the Canadian Film Department, you have to be a Canadian citizen to direct the film. You have to have a certain percentage, and I think it's 80-something% of Canadian crew. And that's awesome because not only is it taking care of somebody's wallet, but it's also taking care of the people and the local morale and all that sort of stuff. And that's the amazing thing that happens. And even within, you have a film community, but then you have your local film community. And I don't mean the films that are produced locally, I mean the local people that are involved in these major films. And we each carry like this badge of honor. It's weird that we recognize where the walls are. And I can walk into a certain area in the same way I'm sure that all of us have that thing that people might know us for. Oh, you're that guy that raped Carl. That's not fun to say. But it's still like I have that Walking Dead like sort of badge where people take me more seriously now within the community, and that's cool. I mean, fuck you, I went to Juilliard, but still, that's cool. And like Schmuck over here in Vampire Diaries or Search for Bobby Jones or whatever he's in. Like, I get that every day. But you know, those sort of badges, it's kind of cool, and I think the film incentive and that industry growing around that is sort of responsible for that.
Well, and what you were saying about how the tax incentive program caused a boom in Atlanta specifically, the reverse happened in Florida. And Florida was one of the first states to institute a tax credit program, and we had a really good thriving film and TV industry going on there. Miami primarily, but also in Orlando and a few other areas. And you know, I went to Tallahassee 2 years in a row with Film Florida to try to get them to continue the tax incentive programs. And the legislature there decided to just let it die on the vine. And it killed the film industry. So it's, you know, when you have the legislature not caring about the economy and not caring about how the film industry affects it, because they look at it as, well, we're just giving away tax dollars and not seeing the big picture. You know, one study was done that showed for every dollar spent, you get $15 of economic boost.
Right, and that's the information that needs to get out there, because what we're hearing, and this is my fear, because we've got a major election coming up this year for governor, and it's going to be critical to a lot of this stuff, because so many of these tax incentives in other businesses, and I've seen this in other communities when back in my reporting days, where they offered these major companies these tax incentives, and they did it stupidly so that once the time period was up, the companies just packed up and left. And we didn't do that with the film one, which was smart, but if somebody gets in there and says, nope, we don't want to do that anymore, it will be that quick. Well, and then Florida's a class, and North Carolina is another example.
When all this was kind of being discussed, whether they should continue the tax incentive programs or not, the head of Disney in Florida was at the Film Florida meeting and said point blank, it is economically unsound for them to shoot in a state that does not have a tax incentive program.
Nowadays, that's absolutely true.
And, you know, and then when Louisiana scaled back their tax incentive programs, Disney pulled completely out of Louisiana and focused on Atlanta.
I mean, look at New Mexico. New Mexico. They shoot a ton of movies there. And the big difference is they're offering better incentives. And now LA is starting to come around and trying to match some of these. But they don't, like this producer had told me years ago, they don't care where it is. Give them a deal. They don't care. They can make anything work.
I mean, we had a show that was shooting here, shot its first season here, that LA just got back. It also happened with Teen Wolf. There's several shows that are happening that way. But I think, I mean, it's the fact that so much of Atlanta business is tied up into the film industry now, whether it be, I just forgot their names, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A's invested in Pinewood, Home Depot, Coca-Cola, all of these Atlanta-born businesses that are now tying their assets into it. Right. Plus, Atlanta just shot the most expensive film ever made, Infinity War. Yep. And reshoots in September. Guardians is slated for next year here. So like, there's still stuff, and like Disney is putting their money where their mouth is. I mean, Life Size 2 is shooting for the Disney Channel now in Atlanta. So it's awesome that these companies are still putting the effort into and taking advantage. It is the most intelligent thing for them to do.
I think what needs to also be said, not only to keep the tax incentives, but I think we need to keep in mind that we need to modify them to stay competitive, because it's shown by just giving a better deal, it works, right? So some enterprising state is going to come up with a better deal.
They will.
And then we may lose out. And so it's obviously the bottom line. Like, think about the very first year, I think $300 million got spent, first year of the tax incentive on movies. And the 5% that we did better than Shreveport, obviously that translates to what, 20 million? 20 million is not bad, that extra 20 million that the producer saved coming here, right? If someone gives a better deal than Georgia, we still have a little bit of an advantage because Georgia has great locations. It's in great infrastructure, but we better be ready to react to that too. So not just keeping the tax incentives, we need to be
Oh no, you're right,
forward-thinking.
Barry. And one thing that Georgia does that some of the others don't do, and it was a stroke of genius, and I don't know who came up with this. It might have been Wilbur or some of these guys. They started this program where a community, a city or a county can become camera ready. And that, I've heard from location people and stuff saying, you have no idea how easy that makes their job, where they can go into a county and know that they're going to have the locations they need without a hassle. We shot an independent film back in 2011, and Baldwin, Georgia had just gone camera ready. And we were an indie, we were, $150,000 budget, but we were an indie film. And we were a SAG film. These guys welcomed us with open arms. They were camera ready. The mayor was taking us on a tour of locations. And if that's what's going on in other cities and counties, and from what I hear it is, that gives us a real edge, because there's a lot of states that don't do that. So you're right. It is more than just money in the long run.
And I think it's also, you have all these counties that have established their own county film commissions,
Yes.
right? And these specific cities, yeah. And that's incredible. That's a great way. Savannah is an ideal place because to shoot in the streets of Savannah, it's $20. And that's for any independent filmmaker. By doing that and having those incentives not just be for the big people at the top, but for the people at the bottom, you're now breeding a culture of filmmakers, people that understand what it's like to be on a set, that they get the idea. I think we still are in this weird place where people from, I grew up in Canton, Georgia, and some people were telling me, well, Tom Cruise is over here shooting a movie, you should go ask him for a part. And I'm like, well, that's not really how it works. But that sort of, that notion still exists, yet at the same time, the city of Ball Ground, which has a ball and ground, that's all that's there, has a film commission, and that's fucking amazing. The one thing that I would want, if beggars can be choosers, is that add another incentive, but it's above the line incentive now. You know what I mean? To try to encourage something else, to get some more Georgia talent.
Exactly.
Well, I know there was move on to start taking better care of the post-production people, because they were the ones that got sort of forgotten in this thing. That was the one screw up we made, and I think it's being addressed, and it has been corrected. But that's something we want to pay attention to, because, and music is another one, because there are so many. It's like with the housing industry. Until they lost that industry, they didn't realize how much was affected by that. You had Shaw Carpets took a huge hit because you got to carpet homes. The lumber industry, the people that make tiles, the people that make bathroom fixtures. So all these industries that were in Georgia that just went belly up because you weren't building homes anymore. And it's true in the film industry now. It is amazing how much is tied up in that in a good way. It's keeping a lot of people working that have no idea what the film industry is.
Next.
I was going to say, I do appreciate the fact that, on Keith's point, is that some of what's being done does help independent filmmakers. I shot 3 movies last year, and only one qualified for the tax incentive. However, the camera ready helped me on the other 2. And so I was able to take advantage of the culture that's being bred, in terms of administratively throughout the state, to get good locations for my other independent films that didn't quite qualify for the Texas Center.
Yep. Good point.
Well, one area that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that I see that can still be built up in this area is origination. And independent filmmakers like yourself really are the backbone for that. But when you have most of the films that are brought here are originated in California, they're written there, the producers are there, the base of operations is still in California. There still needs to be some sort of development locally to be able to change that investment, for money, to really truly make Atlanta or any of the regions, but specifically here, because there is that infrastructure, I think that needs to be added to it.
I agree, and I think to go back to my brilliant metaphor earlier about
was brilliant, yes.
the Atlanta film industry being in its high school years, it's because there's still maturation to go. If we look at voiceover artists are getting screwed over.
Oh yeah, don't get me on that one.
The
good
audiobook
point.
stuff,
Yep.
it's all of that needs to rise up. Music production needs to rise up. Even the post, like you said, Greg Crawford is like one of the most amazing people you'll ever meet in your life, and he does all these amazing post-production stuff for all of the films that everybody loves, but still get shafted on occasion. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think we've grown leaps and bounds, but the benefit that California has to us is that it's been Hollywood for longer.
Sure.
And Atlanta should never fucking be Hollywood, because we don't need to be, but we need to have that same level of understanding and that infrastructure that we haven't. We're not finished yet. And the minute that we think that we're set is going to be the death of us.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
And on a little positive note of what you're talking about, the voiceover thing, a lot of us didn't realize how bad that had gotten. Those of us who are in that industry, and there is a move on within the last 6 months. We are organized and rising up against that, because we've been getting killed by these internet sites like 123 Voice 123 and stuff, where they know they can offer kids the $100 jobs or whatever, and we're losing out on the union jobs because the people are going for the cheap stuff.
But that's a perfect example of something too, where Voice 123 is I totally get your point, but at the same time, it's democratizing art, which is a good thing, but it in of itself is an indication that the industry media is always growing. I mentioned it earlier, a podcast that I'm doing. We're a SAG podcast. But the problem is SAG doesn't have...
No, they don't have a category.
They don't have a category.
No, we
for
ran
that.
through the same thing with our network.
So
there's no category for podcasting.
So we have to have, we're a narrative thing, but so we've been talking to SAG, and they came up with a deal for us that's a mixture of new media with an old broadcasting thing.
Right.
But it's a statement to the fact that these industries are constantly in evolution and growing. Then you throw in the idea of streaming, and that's fucked everything up as far as residuals
You're right.
and stuff like that.
He's right.
So it's about us figuring out where our feet go, and we're getting close to having that resolved. Now we have to learn how to walk with them so that we can keep in motion. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the state of what Atlanta's in. We have a good majority of the infrastructure. We're building up our culture. People are coming here. People like what they're shooting here. The films it's 7 of the top 10 films of this year have been shot in Georgia?
Yes.
And that's amazing. That's fucking awesome. We've crossed the billion mark 4 times this year. So we're doing good, but doesn't mean we're the best yet. We just have to keep going.
We can't get complacent. It's like being an actor. You can't ever think you've arrived, know enough, and get complacent. You've got to stay on top of it.
Well, I think in terms of original content, that's a really good point, and it's been brought up several times in different settings. The Georgia Film Academy is one place to start with some of that. I was at a local university where they had shot and produced and then screened for a small audience a pilot, which was really exciting. And it was a SAG-AFTRA pilot. They work with students, they work with professionals. And so they're like these little incubators that are around. They're not... It's not just one thing. They're little bubbles up, and there's...
Well, I remember when SCAD was it.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big deal when SCAD came up and running.
SCAD, Georgia
and now
State,
we've got
Kennesaw,
AIA and stuff. We got and
Emory.
SCAD moved, has a campus here now in Atlanta, and it's amazing. The facilities are available to us.
I mean, even the outreach of Ted Turner can still not be denied.
Oh,
and you want to talk about the 90s, but still all those people that worked at Turner, almost every person I've ever met that worked in that complex is a filmmaker. and they've all grown. If you look at Adult Swim, it is mostly Atlanta talents or people that have been in Atlanta for over 20 years that are making stuff, and they're helping out with each other's shows. And it's a wonder to be a part of that, but it's also awesome to watch because it's the biggest thing I've ever been on that felt independent. You know what I mean? and even to the degree where they have like pinball machines in the break room, so that's cool. But it's awesome, and I do think that, again, an above the line incentive to promote more Georgia, locals as producers above the line, or creators, or writers, or any of that would be a helpful thing.
Well, I think it's helpful not in just, obviously as a filmmaker and someone who knows that green lights happen in LA more often than they ever happen in Georgia. It's not only great to sort of create a culture of the above the line talent in Georgia for the sake of Georgia creators, but it's part of the fact that if someone does create that better deal in another state, if you have enough producers and above the line folks who are used to making films in Georgia, you can at least keep some of that.
Exactly. And it's the idea too that we can alleviate some of the stress from other parts. I mean, everybody can make movies, you know what I mean? And if we start breeding into our minds, the fear is that we raise an entire generation of Atlanta filmmakers to think you're only crew and you're only supporting roles.
Yeah.
And that's why I hate the mentality that happens in acting classes of know your type. Fuck that. I don't want to have a ceiling above me. I want to be able to do any fucking thing I want to do. I watch Batman. He tells me I can be anything. Anyway,
That's right.
So that sort of mentality. So if we start encouraging people to be execs, to be leads, to be the writers, then we now promote that culture where we know how to operate on a set, we know we can take control, we know we can do all of it,
Yeah, and it becomes a safety net for our own industry that's so important. It's proven to be important now, but if it went away tomorrow, I don't think we're ready. But if we could breed that infrastructure on the creator's side, on the producer side, then we'd have a safety net.
Final thoughts, anybody? I know we're running
Well,
almost
just
out of time here.
again, from the outsider's point of view, looking at Florida that has several major film schools, and people leaving the film schools are coming here, or going to Vancouver, or going elsewhere. It's a very fragile industry, and if Florida is an example, it's one not to follow.
All right, folks. You got it? All I can say is Keith Brooks, your pretty face is going to help. But yes, anyway, so talking about, we do have an incredible situation here, and I hope we can keep it. And thanks for joining us, talking about the Atlanta film industry. And that's it from the Something Wicked Film Festival 2018. We're going to see you next year. Thanks, folks.